Thanks everyone for joining. This is Brksec 2227, where we're going to be talking about evaluating, improving our defense with MITRE ATT&CK. My name is Tim Snow. I'm a regional architect with Cisco, based in APJC and covering APJ with a little bit of C, meaning Taiwan, Hong Kong, and southern China. So I'm going to share with you how we use MITRE in our products, how you can use MITRE and the various open source tools that they have in your environment. Here's what our agenda looks like. I want to thank you all for joining. Thanks, we've got some newcomers, first time to Cisco Live. I want to thank you all for allowing us, for non-Australian people, to come here. It's a great country, it's a great city. I love the culture here and really appreciate all of you for having us. It's great to be invited back. That said, we do get scored on our capabilities to deliver, so if we don't score well, we can't come back. Just a plug for candies and whatnot. Just saying. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over cyber threat intel, what open source options are out there. We're going to talk about some of the tools that MITRE gives us from attack. We're going to go over defend. We're going to go over open source tools like detect, Navigator, all that good stuff. And we're going to go, if any of you have heard of Sunza, I've got a colleague and a friend of mine named Mike Storm who often talks about Sunza and the art of war. Know yourself, know your enemies, 100 battles, 100 victories, right? So we just need to know both sides of the equation. So that's what we're going to kind of follow today. So knowing your enemy, knowing yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the third-party or open source tools like Caldera for how to verify that we're doing the right things. So I've got a lot of demos in today's session. It's going to be very light on Cisco products. I do want to kind of run through how we use MITRE across all of our platforms. Okay, so if some of them you may recognize, some may be new to you. I've already heard the comment today about, hey, Cisco has security products? Yes, and we have Cisco Live Tracks too. So we do have a lot of security technologies, a lot of different products. They're not all standalone. There are integrations. There are Threat Intelligence Director. We can share telemetry and IOCs and metadata between all the different systems. And then we'll wrap up with a conclusion. So that's the goal. I know you've all seen this. Again, we have the Brksec 2227 room already there. I've said hello to everyone, and I've put the slides there. Any questions for today, follow-up stuff, if you need my contact information, I'll put it in there as well. And after this session, I'll put a bunch of other links in there to goodness, right? Trials and some of the tools that we have. So a little bit about me. I'm an architect at Cisco. I've been here 18 years. So I've done a whole bunch of different jobs, everything from enterprise networking to data center. We had a WAN technology for a while that I was gifted as being the go-to guy for about 6 months, and in security for the last 10 or 11 years. So I cover the whole region. So I've got customers that are huge conglomerates across multiple countries. I've got banks, I've got public sector, I've got electrical grid, water, all of that stuff, right? So kind of spanning across all of them. I did a couple CCIEs, routing and switching and security, like 24 years ago, something like that, quite a long time. And so I've been doing this stuff for a while. Prior to Cisco, I was in TAC. I did some level 3 jobs in TAC, including escalation for issues. I had a couple major global customers, and in school I did development, so computer science. If anyone follows college football, American college football, Michigan, go blue. I think we're going to take it all this year. Super excited about that because my buddy is a fan of our rival. So I can't wait. We just beat them 2 weeks ago. That was great. He refuses to watch the game with me. So super happy about that. So that's the work side. About me personally, I'm from Canada, moved to the US around the age of 20 and then moved to APJC. Husband and a father. I got a couple great kids. I love tinkering around with all things, IoT, sensors and switches and all that stuff, Home Assistant. I don't know if you guys want to chat about that. Let me know. Love all that stuff. My wife says, do you really need to automate that? And I'm like, it's not about, do I need to? It's about tinkering around, breaking things, sipping a glass of wine, and seeing how things work. She says it's a bit much. I disagree. 3D printing and robotics, primarily as a way to teach my kids about technology. Actually, it's an excuse so I can buy cool stuff and break stuff, and she doesn't go. I'm like, it's for the kids, honey. It's for the kids. So yeah, retro arcades. So growing up in the 80s and trying to relive some of those times of dropping in quarters. So I build arcade systems, emulators, and all that stuff. And lastly, a lifelong beginner at golf. Regardless how much I practice or how much I play, I know it could be beer or something, I don't know, but I never seem to get better. I'm struggling at kind of this thing. It's me against myself, and it's just, yeah, that's golf. All right, so enough about that and enough about me and my role at Cisco. Welcome, folks. What is this session about? We are going to try and break down that barrier, that common idea that we get security by way of compliance checkboxes. Right, we're going to focus on understanding our enemy, understanding ourselves, and really validating that and looking to see what we can actually do and what we can't do to iterate on that and get better. So we're going to use some free tools. I mentioned the Attack Navigator. We're going to talk about Detect, Defend, and Caldera. If you haven't used the emulation software before, we're going to try to understand the threat picture, what gaps we have, and try to see if we can come up with some quick wins. All the stuff, except for the Cisco products, are going to be open source. All the links are in the slides, so do take your knowledge that you get today and bring it back to work, play around. A lot of this stuff can be done just on a single laptop, so you don't need a whole lab environment or UCS servers to build all this stuff, right? One thing I will say is I'm not able to use my own laptop, so when the demos come up, I got to come over here and hide behind this podium, and the pause doesn't work so well. So I recorded them just because I've been on stage before where Wi-Fi wasn't so good or my lab wasn't accessible, and it's hard to do a demo without anything to look at, right? So not going to do that again. Reference materials. There's a lot of stuff to cover in Attack. In fact, these guys have their own conference. So there is information about the conference, about Attack. We're going to go through a primer on that. We are going to talk about, again, understanding our environment and what are the things that we can do. If there are questions, just maybe put your hand up and I'll come back to you when I take a break so we can keep the flow going. If you prefer to ask in the room, again, you can do that as well. The slides are there for anyone that just joined. So that's where we're at. I want to break the myth that CTI or cyber threat intelligence was only reserved for the biggest of the big. That like you have to buy this thing from someone, or you need people to monitor blogs and create your own. It's just not true. There is a lot of resources available for us. MITRE is a great example. Okay. So the information that they share can be really, really useful for us, and we're going to see it in action. So time for a little game. I know it was just after lunch, hence the reason for the snacks up front. So let's see if we can guess who I'm talking about here. For any of you that have already seen the slides, no bonus points for skipping ahead. So try and guess who I'm talking about. Enterprise class business and service provider. Multinational, multi-million-dollar organization based in Eastern Europe. They specialized in full-service data encryption and transport. 125,000 servers, heavily invested in healthcare. I'm looking for smiles here if anyone starts to figure out who we're talking about. Full service and turnkey ops for their customers, and they're considered a technical and strategic leader in their area of business. Anyone? So they provide the entire outsourced chain, both commercial and government. Oops. It's not my clicker, so I kind of clicked too quick. Well, it's a hint. Not necessarily on our side, right? So these guys, the adversary group that I'm going to talk about, were the ones who developed Conti, Ryuk, TrickBot, and a couple others. Okay, when we talk about the infrastructure, this is the systems that they own, right? Meaning they've owned those endpoints, not necessarily that they're using that for staging. So what I'm talking about here is not a large bank in Europe. I'm talking about an adversary. They sell rats as a service. They also include support. Oh, you didn't get the infection rates you were looking for? Let's take a look. Yeah, it's wild. The whole market for this has completely changed. When you buy a service, right, this is what you're getting. So we're going to talk about Wizard Spider a lot. We're also going to talk about APT28, Fancy Bear, recently also in the news as of like 2 days ago, again. So we're gonna talk about these guys. We're gonna dissect their tactics, techniques, and what information we have about them. But it's just really interesting to note that they do kind of full turnkey life cycle, from infection to delivery, to making sure that the system has the C2 set up, and then outsource it to cut. Oh, you want to add something else onto that? No problem. How many infections would you like? And you pay for that, right? Kind of a tiered pricing. Right. So when we talk about the concern of the day, right? How many of you have bosses that will read on CNN or Bloomberg or Schneier's blog or whatever, and they say, "Oh, what's this attack? Should we be concerned about it? You know, what are we going to do? Defensive?" Calm down. All right, calm down. We need to think about what's the potential impact for us. Are we the intended target? If you're in healthcare, maybe you don't care about a banking Trojan. Or if it's something that's targeted at a specific kind of hardware and we don't have that hardware, right? Maybe we can feel a little bit more at ease. This is very common, especially in the news, right? The hype of infections sells more than, oh, somebody blocked an attack. Great, skip, next, right? Keep scrolling. So the concern we have is we're always hearing about more and more threats in the environment, bigger impact, right? And so that gets a lot of the news. I've got some examples here. I'm going to try not to. We're not going to pick on any specific country. We're going to pick on everyone equally. Just some of the newer examples tend to focus, especially in our part of the world. But let's say, for example, we're talking about Black Energy or Sandworm. So that kind of 2015, 2016 Ukrainian power issue that they had, 2 of them, right? If we read about that in the news, should we immediately go, uh-oh, let's turn off our environment, something to be concerned about? Maybe not. Highly targeted, specific to the power grid, right? Maybe not necessarily for our banking front end or our specific machines that we have in our environment. So the point here is just because something's in the news doesn't mean we need to go full panic mode and going, all right, what do we need to do? There is always a but, though. Even though this might not be specific to us, we should be looking at what's happening. How are the techniques evolving? What are the tactics and procedures in use? And can, or should we be concerned, and can those morph into something that could potentially impact us? So it's great to read about that stuff and understand it, but we need to make sure that we understand our own environment, learn from that, and take any appropriate response. All right, so we say, at least back home, we say don't chase other people's boogeyman. I don't know if that translates over here, but don't necessarily chase after what you're reading in the news. Understand the tactics of your adversaries. Understand if they're not an adversary of yours, if they're just kind of generic ransomware, not targeted, what are the things you guys need to do, right? Do you have all those checkboxes, right? Evaluate your firewalls, your IPS, your sandboxes, your endpoint security, all of that. We're going to give you some ways to do that today. So, understanding your environment. We talk a lot about risk in security, and there's a balance between your threats, your vulnerabilities, and consequences. So when we look at this, any one of these being a 0, obviously our threat works out to be, or our risk turns out to be a 0. So risk equals threat, so who could attack us? Do we have anyone specific coming after us or our industry, right? How many of you are in financial sector? How about healthcare, hospitals, clinics? I saw on the list there was some critical infrastructure folks here. How about other services, police, health and safety, a couple others, education? All right, so we need to look at threats that may be specific to your environment, the threat actors that may come for your crown jewels, as it were. So we think about risk. It is the threat that's after us, the vulnerability of the system. What would happen if our critical device, system, database, resources was compromised? Okay? So the consequences is what could happen. Obviously, if you're in different kinds of businesses, that not only does your crown jewels change, but the impact of it changes. If you're a bank and it's your core banking system, if you're in healthcare and all your patient records were taken, so it's obviously very different across different kinds of business. So that's the risk from it. So where do we start? All these threats that we're reading about during the day. My kids ask me, Daddy, what do you do? I heard about ransomware. I'm like, okay, what else have you heard about? And they never come up and say DDoS or MFA was never mentioned in my house. They just hear about these things about the screen getting encrypted and getting asked to pay, right? That's the buzzword. If we're in security, we hear about this stuff all the time. This is our world, right? It's really cool to be in this industry because things are dynamic. They're always changing. There's always stuff to learn. Not that networking doesn't have that, but I think it's much more cooler in security, right? We got a lot more stuff. So we need to look at the global threat picture, but also what's applicable to us. Again, back to the who is your adversary? Would it be Deep Panda, Wizard Spider, APT 28, 29, whoever it is? Would they come after you specifically, or will you just be kind of the spray and pray and you're the one that got infected with ransomware? Maybe you do have, especially if you're in critical infrastructure, water, power, any of those type of services, that you may be a target for a nation state or somebody with extensive resources, time, and desire to penetrate your environment, right? So keep this in mind when we do security. So we've got a graph here, and what this is going to show is that the earlier we can detect, it's funny to talk about because we say the earlier you can detect, the more options you have to thwart, and the less responsive you need to be. Okay, and I'll do my best to explain that. So if we say, right, here's our cost and productivity, here's when a breach happens. This doesn't mean disclosure. This is just when we see something that's happened, right? So something's coming into our environment, and then we have boom time, right? This is where fully detected, everyone's aware, the CISO's going, hey, what's up? Something's in our environment. What are we gonna do? Mandatory meeting in the office, everyone in, right? That's boom. What we want to try and do, obviously, is detect much earlier than that, right? No brainer, simple. However, what are we using to detect it? Are we using the same technologies that we've used over the past? Are you still fighting with, how are you collecting logs? Do you only have 8x5? Or do you have 24/7? Or maybe some of you outsource your SOC. We have all these dynamics pushing against us, right? Talent is hard to find, it's expensive. Right? My boss is here in the room, so wink, wink. So we know all of these challenges are not necessarily on our side, and that technology evolution, right? I do this, another kind of speech where I talk to customers, specifically executives, about that balance. And I often talk about the adversaries. What do they have? Do they play by the same rule book? Heck no. Do they have the same resources we do, or resource constraints? Probably not. Do they work on the weekends? Absolutely, right? Do they maybe have a team? Do they share information? Maybe more so than we do? Yeah. And what's one thing that they really have? Desire. I'm sure you all care about your environments, but these guys are gonna live or not live, depending upon whether or not they get into your environment or not. So they will spend all of their resources to try and get into the environment that they're focused on to steal that information, right? So it's a very, very difficult balance. So what we're trying to do here is detect earlier, understand our environment, understand what would happen at boom, okay? And try to see what we can do before that. Because after that, if you're in full-on crisis mode, your job is to just eradicate the threat, right? It's not to go and learn how they got in and do this. No, it's to stop full-on infection, because some of this, especially if you get up here, you could have an extinction level event, especially if you're a smaller business, right? That could completely not only destroy your stock price, trust in your brand, right? There's been lots of news reports about executives stepping down when breaches happen, right? It could be damaging to your personal career, right? So some of this is really, really bad if it's a full-on breach, especially if you're in some of that critical infrastructure. I mean, it's important for everyone, but even more so if you're in critical infrastructure. So we want to avoid this and try to detect a little bit earlier if we can. We will be talking about some other tools for SOC and filtering some of that high fidelity, high criticality event with Sigma and a couple others. Right, so this is that quote. Shout out to my buddy Mike Storm. So he often talks about this. There's a lot of really good security terms in the art of war. So do take a look at that, not just cool pictures, right? So the idea is we need to know ourselves, know our enemies, and if we do that, we know both sides of the equation. We know what we can do better to get one step ahead. So anyone use attack? A couple? All right, 4, 5? All right. How extensively, if I can ask you a question? Is it something that's in your practices all the time reviewing? All right. Okay, so if you have anything to add into this and how you guys use it, either in the room or feel free to chime up, that would be wonderful. For the rest of us that may not be using this all the time, I'm gonna show you how quickly, in 5 minutes, you can get some tangible information back from this tool and know not only who your adversary is, but potentially what tools you have in your environment that you could use to better protect yourselves. Again, it's open source. It's free from MITRE. So let's take a look at it. So when we talk about getting to know your adversary, attack is great. It stands for adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. So the MITRE Corporation, they do all kinds of stuff. They were the ones who created the Common Vulnerability Database. Not necessarily the scoring part, but they are a non-profit, not-for-profit US-based company, and they've got all kinds of federally funded projects, but not just in cybersecurity, aviation and defense and all sorts of stuff, right? The tools, again, that we're talking about, you don't need an account. There's no data information that you need to supply to have access to this. All of them you can run, or most of them you can run locally. So they can be, if you're in an air-gapped environment, you don't need necessarily a connection to the cloud. So we're on version 4.1, just updated a couple weeks ago. So I updated the videos in here with the latest and greatest. It's in a constant state of update. As we learn, right, as the common knowledge database gets bigger, MITRE is updating attack and the other tools. So if you've heard of the kill chain before, I'm assuming everyone in this room, it's a good example, and I'm gonna refer it back to MITRE. So when we talk about the kill chain, this is quite often how attackers will go from initial kind of mapping and discovery to exploitation, to persistence, to exfiltration, right? There's many steps in this. They don't just jump in and say, I'm gonna start taking, they have to get onto a system first. So we can start looking at, and maybe you guys do vendor product mappings to this to say, hey, that will help us do better at this. It's okay, I'm just gonna give you an alternate option. So from reconnaissance, so the initial discovery, to weaponizing the threat, to the delivery, like could be email is quite often a common one, or a redirect to some sort of cloud hosting where you download the tool, and that's where the exploitation happens, installation, C2, and then potentially the exfiltration or the spread within the internal environment. This is very common as a way to visualize threats. MITRE and the attack, I'll say framework. It really should be called the attack matrix, but so I'll try to use the correct terminology, but I might still say framework every once in a while. So the MITRE attack matrix focuses on the tactics and techniques and how we can kind of compartmentalize them within a similar type of look and feel. So here is the cyber kill chain. Here is the MITRE attack. So there's 14 tactics, and within that there's 200 and something techniques, and then there's 400 and something sub-techniques and all of that. I'll give you a better picture of it. So what we can do is we can use the same visualization of the tactics compared to the kill chain. So what is a tactic? This is the why of a technique. So this could be the goal, the tactical goal of an adversary in your environment. So it could be something like persistence, meaning if I get in, I want to stay in. System reboots, I want to stay on reboot. I want to stay resident, right? I want to get hooks into the system, as an example. That would be a goal, okay? The techniques are going to be, how do I try and accomplish that goal? Okay, and there's going to be a whole bunch of different ways we can do that. Another one here that I use is credential access. So at the high level, the goal or the tactic is credential access, meaning I want to get usernames and passwords. How do I do that? This is my technique. This is the how. So there's techniques like different numbers here. You can see them all. They're all, and we'll reference back to the attack matrix. But this is the how it happens. So the 201 enterprise tactics, I didn't mention it earlier, but there's 3 attack matrices, I should say. There is enterprise, mobile, and ICS. If some of you are in the mobile space or in industrial controls, there's a different matrix. So here is the different techniques, and then inside of that, there is sub-techniques. Okay, so credential access, gaining the usernames and passwords. How do I do it? I'm going to dump the credentials. That's just one technique. Within that is my sub-technique. So maybe the local, I think it's local security authority, subsystem service. That would be this one. Okay, on Linux, it's slightly different. So we're seeing where the sub-techniques are all part of the credential dumping. And the procedure is actually the commands or the tools used to do it, okay? So we go from the goal to the how we're gonna do it, to the specifics of how, into the implementation of the how, the procedure, okay? That's the last P in TTP, right? So that's the sub-techniques, and again, the procedures. So this is things that we see like in the wild. They could be tools like Mimikatz or whatever stuff, Proc Internals has some, all kinds of stuff out there that you can find, okay? So this is the implementation that the adversary uses to do the tactic. All right, now I want to give some examples of kind of putting things together in the real life, especially when we talk about adversary profiles. So the analogies I like to use is bank robbers. I wouldn't really call these kind of guys a bank robber, although they are robbing. This could be some guy who, an hour before was like, I'm broke, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna smash a window, try and grab money, not knowing anything about dyes or anything like that, and I'm gonna leave my footprint, right? Maybe not the smartest guy. But here's the things I can look at, right? How did they gain access? What did they do when they were inside? What was their disguise? What kind of indicators of compromise were left? Size 8 Adidas. Okay? These are the kind of things that when I say, all right, this particular adversary or this particular robber did these sort of things. Compare this kind of lone guy versus somebody like this. Maybe they have disguises. Maybe they disguise as landscapers. There was a really big one that I was reading about in Brazil. These guys dug a 500-meter tunnel under a bank. 500 meters. Underground, complete with ventilation and cooling and a little coffee machine. Wild. That's not the smash and grab guy, right? So these guys will come in. They may have expertise in break-in safes, right? Maybe they're only after certain things, gold bars. So they don't have to deal with some of the blue dye stuff, right? Obviously very, very different. You could say script kiddie, nation state, as an example. The reason I'm talking about this is because when we do the profile in MITRE, you're gonna see that the techniques and tactics are very different across different adversarial groups, okay? All right, so what MITRE is not, it is not a compliance framework. You cannot go, I'm MITRE certified. I mean, you could, but anyone who knows what they're talking about would be like, how do you say you're, what you can do is you can measure your capabilities to the adversarial's techniques, for sure, but only you know how well you've implemented the proper controls to mitigate those threats, correct? You don't just go, I got it, hey, firewall in, segmentation done, next. It's not like that, okay? So, there's no compliance checkbox. You could say it's an architecture where you have to look across all components. Is no guarantee of success or 100% protection. Like most things or all things in security, there is no Uber box that just does everything for you, despite other sessions or other events you might have been in. There's not one that does everything. And not all techniques are equally weighted. Some may be more critical than others, just like some tactics or some techniques may have higher efficacy when we're looking at detecting them, okay? It's not exhaustive, not everything is there. Like I said, we're on version 4.1 now. There's a lot more that needs to be updated. We're always gonna be seeing more, and there is some things that are not in the public domain, and some things we just don't know about yet, okay? Excellent. So, I'm not sure if you've all seen this before, this is quite dated, but still applicable. The pyramid of pain. So if we look at hash values, easy to block, right? Look at domains, easy to block. IP addresses, right? We've been doing that stuff for ages. What's more difficult to change? Maybe some of the tools. Maybe the TTPs. If I'm used to doing bank robberies like this, and somebody says, hey, no tunnels, what do I do, right? Or they don't have a safe, they do it some other way, right? You need to change everything that you're doing. And so quite often, we've been focusing down here. We've been saying, hey, you just use this open source URL categorization. They'll tell you all the domains that are bad, use that. I'm not saying don't do that, because we do have an umbrella product that does just that. But what I'm saying is that this is not the only way to do security and to be kind of on the challenging side to the adversary. So what we need to do is we need to look at not just going after the symptom, but really what the problem is. So up here, okay? All right, when we talk about adversaries getting into our environment, this is a little bump, if you will. They can change, right? They can get new IP addresses. They can easily stand up new domains. Look at FastFlux. They can even code their malware to change domains certain times of the day. All right, so what we're looking at doing is instead of forcing the adversaries to, I don't know, set up a new region in AWS, get a new IP address range, okay? What we wanna do is we wanna make the hurdle a little bit more difficult for them to scale. Why do we want to do that? The more time that they spend doing this, the more time we have to get left of boom. Meaning that maybe we can spot things a little bit earlier. Maybe we can frustrate them a little bit more so the bad guys will just say, you know what, that bank or that education system or that government, too difficult, I'm gonna move on. If any of you have seen the slides, I think I used one the last time, maybe last year or 2 years ago, about the bear. If you're ever camping and there's a bear attack, you don't have to be the fastest, just don't be the slowest, right? I'm not saying kick your buddies in the leg so that the bear gets them first, but the idea is you don't have to be, I mean, we all want to strive to as close as we can get to perfection and security, but sometimes we can focus on easy to do things and just be annoying for the adversaries, and maybe they'll move on. Not always. If you're a target, you're still a target, right? But the goal is to have them scale this instead of just changing their dynamic infrastructure. Okay? So if you're a target of a nation state and they're really after you, this can still frustrate them, maybe buying you some more time. All right. A easy way to think about, or an easier way to think about the attack is kind of like the periodic table. So normally, when we talk about adversarial groups, we talk about all of the things that they do in kind of a compound view, as opposed to a single element, okay? So if you take water and you take sodium and you drop sodium in water, it's dangerous, right? If any of you took chemistry in high school, always fun. Same thing with the adversarial profiles. If they do certain things and they start to combine those techniques and tactics, right, the impact is much greater. So when we look at the periodic table, you've got your noble gases, you've got your halogens, you've got your metals and nonmetals and all that goodness, right? And they're kind of classified. Same thing with the attack. Okay, same thing with the attack matrix. In that the columns here represent the 14 different tactics, and then the techniques are within it, okay? So adversaries will use, in this case, you can see, maybe I'm looking at one specific group, they may use techniques across multiple different tactics. There may be tactics they don't use at all, okay? What we find is that most of them use almost all. Some double down in discovery. Some just kind of spray and pray, and hopefully hopefully emails get delivered to end users and they click, okay? The more seasoned groups and the adversarial groups that have been around for a while tend to have more in their arsenal because they've used and they've changed techniques over the years. So some of the ones that we look at, you'll see that. All right, so what's inside attack? And then we're gonna move on to some demos of how to use the Navigator first off. So what's inside attack? Open source, cyber threat intelligence, blog entries, Cisco is included in there, our Talos organization, community feeds, whatnot. All of that comes in. We create 14 tactics, hundreds of techniques and sub-techniques, 143 groups in the current 4.0 or 4.x, meaning that adversarial groups. Not groups of techniques and tactics, but 143 groups, 760 cataloged applications. So things like Mimikatz and other ones that we'll talk about today. So those are the ones that will tell you, hey, this particular group, Fancy Bear as an example, will use some of these tools. 50, 75, 100 of the different tools out there, versus another group may use a different amount. From that, we have 43 mitigations. You're like, why is there only 43 mitigations for 424? Obviously, there's sub-parts to this, but when we say, all right, protecting against credential theft, there's gonna be lots of components in here, okay? Don't be concerned that we've only got 43 tools to fight 424 sub-techniques, okay? So that's what the MITRE attack gives us. And if we look at it as a whole, it's helping us to understand, if you took English classes before about how to write an essay, who, what, where, when, why, and how, the 5 W's plus an H. I'm not sure for those that may be from other countries if that is applicable. But who is threatening us, meaning the group. Why are they doing it? What are they doing is the technique. Why are they doing it? Their tactic. How is the procedure. Where can we prevent it is the mitigation. And when are we gonna notice it is our detection, okay? So that's what we're gonna look at. So MITRE publishes relations diagrams for the outline and also for specific adversarial groups. What you'll see here is the adversarial group uses this software and implements this technique or this sub-technique. What can we do to prevent it, and what is the tactic that they're trying to get after? So it's a nice, easy model to look at a group, okay, and all of their capabilities. Put in this way, we can also offer what is our detection for that. So if you guys go back and look at your environment and say, all right, who's this potential group I'm looking at? What are the tools they're using? What are they trying to accomplish? What can I do against it, right? And we'll talk later about how you can use this to go to your managers and say, I want to turn on this service on the endpoint because it's going to help me do, using the example of checkboxes, but it's going to give me coverage across these different techniques. So 5 minutes spent rolling out this registry or something with something you can roll out with your patch management software will give me coverage across these different kinds of things, right? So it's also a way to get buy-in and get support. So if I look at APT 28, we can see they use Mimikatz to do credential dumping, and the main goal is credential access. What are the things we can do? We can turn on Credential Guard. We can disable NTLM. You can also turn on LSA protection. Lots of different things you can do. Most of this is covered with just updating to newer OSs, right? Because a lot of these tactics, or a lot of these techniques went away with modern, more modern OSs. And then lastly, what are the things we can do to detect it? So something like PowerShell executes a memory dump, or Task Manager does, and then we use Mimikatz to read that file to try and read the username and password. Lots of different steps that we could detect and different ways we can do it. We're gonna see some demos of that. All right, so before we start, I'm just gonna set up the example of our industry. For those of you in healthcare, this may seem all too familiar, but in this case, we're a 30,000 employee healthcare based in APJC, 6 hospitals, different clinics, and urgent healthcare facilities. We've got an architected infrastructure, but maybe due for a refresh. Mostly Windows for user endpoints. On the server side, mostly Windows with some Linux. We're moving to cloud. We've got some full-time staff. We've got a CISO. We've got some architects. Never have enough time for training and operational best practices, hey, real world, and we've got a bunch of different vendors in our environment. Sounds kind of generic, maybe specific to some of you, but this is just the example we're gonna give. All right, so know your enemy. I'm gonna move over to this podium thing because my laptop was not working, so I'm not trying to hide back here, but I've got the first video ready, and I'm gonna have to pause it in some cases here. All right, so if you go over to attack.miter.org, this is what you're gonna see. And I didn't hit play. Yeah, I blame the laptop, but it's actually me doing it. All right, so up at the top, you're gonna see a bunch of different components of the matrices. You're going to see the mobile, ICS, enterprise. You're gonna see a bunch of different resources that you can go and take a look at. Really, really good stuff. At the bottom, you're gonna see those 14 tactics and all of the techniques within it. If you click on show sub-techniques, like the list goes on forever, right? It's almost daunting. Okay, we're gonna go into this in detail. The first thing I'm gonna do, I wish I could pause this without, yeah, this is not working very well. Yeah, all right, well, that's gonna be a challenge, I think. No, I don't think so. No, I've got a corded mouse up here. Just shows you what I'm dealing with here. All right, well, we're just gonna let it go. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna search up at the top. We're gonna do 2 searches. The first one is going to be generic healthcare. The second one's going to be hospital, right? One in the same. The first one, when we get to the search, is going to, yeah, this is a major challenge. I've got no cursor up here. Yeah, all right, whatever, we'll deal with it. So we're gonna search for healthcare. And what we're gonna find is the 5th or 6th one down is gonna be Anthem. If anyone remembers Anthem from, I think 6, 7 years ago, very large US healthcare organization. They were compromised, 80 million customer or client records compromised. They paid 40 million in penalty, and they changed their name, right? Lots of bad stuff happened, like they didn't kind of go out of business, but the fact that they had to change their name and pay out penalties was pretty severe. So what I'm gonna do here eventually when the video catches up is I'm gonna search for healthcare, and you're gonna see down here that there's one I'm interested in, Anthem, and Deep Panda. So what this did is this showed me all the information for this particular adversarial group and what they kind of go after. So any associated groups, any techniques that are used, and what software tools. So all of this is CTI, right? This is open source intel that's just there for us. If I click on open in view format, what it's going to do, I really wish I could you pause this for me? Since I can't do it myself. There you go, perfect. All right, so what this is showing me is I clicked on Deep Panda, I clicked on view and it opened it up in another tab. What you're seeing here is the mapping of the different techniques that this particular adversarial group uses. So you can see what they don't focus on. So you see 0 out of 4 here. The color codes here, we'll talk about changing them later on. Go ahead and hit play for me. So what you're going to see here is at the top level, these guys use command and scripting interpreter. They use WMI, so Windows management. They use some server-side controls and a bunch of other stuff. So looking at this, I know briefly what this group does. Okay, and I can drill into the sub techniques of them. So what I normally do is I put this the tick box here for aggregation. So when I look at here, I can see the techniques and I don't have to drill into the sub techniques. Okay, so very quickly I know what these guys use. So there's a PowerShell example. This is the server control side where they try to gain control of a service and create a shell and that sort of stuff, right? But all this information is right there in attack. So you could look at this and say, right, I know I've got protections for this, so I think I'm pretty good against these particular guys. Later on, we're going to show you how we can combine multiple adversarial groups into a larger picture and then measure ourselves to that, okay? So you can change the gradients if you prefer, green to red. Again, this will just show you what these guys use. So you can click on this and say, right, what does the web shell mean to establish persistence? Here is all the different groups that use this particular technique, and what are the tools that are out there for this technique. Okay, so all of that information is right there. You also see some others that we've been talking about. How to mitigate it and how to detect it, right? If you think about how a shell works, somebody has interactive communications with a server, network traffic is a pretty good example, right? We can always see a persistent flow. In the case of mitigation, we know that if an adversary gains control of a system, they may spawn some sort of command shell underneath, so I can detect it that way too. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a different search. I'm going to search for hospital, okay? And what you're going to see here is down here at the bottom, Wizard Spider, a different adversarial group. So instead of just opening up a tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of the descriptions for it, the techniques, and software that this particular adversarial group will use, and then I will go and just download the JSON file. Okay? So eventually I will, after I look at all of the different software they use, Conti, Emotet, Cobalt Strike is maybe something familiar to many of you. So if I click on here and I go to download, then I'll go back over to the navigator and I'm going to open up another layer, open up another tab, and I'm going to import that file that I just downloaded. Okay? I'll explain why I did the whole download thing later on when we merge them together. So I'm importing the local one. Look at that. Look at the difference between Deep Panda and Wizard Spider. Look at all the things that they do, right? Typically historical knowledge of the group, okay? Especially if we talk about TrickBot and how that's changed into Ryuk and Conti and all the latest permutations of that. So look at all the things that they do. If some of you caught that really quick, there is some overlap, and we'll see how important that is later. What I'm going to do now is can you pause it for me, please? Right here, you see I've got 2 layers open, or 2 tabs, A and B. So I've got Deep Panda and I've got Wizard Spider. I'm going to merge them together to see what the overlap is, because I know both of these groups tend to target me as a healthcare provider. So I want to look and see, like, where do these guys double down and what can I do to protect myself? Go ahead and hit play. I really wish I could do that. All right, so, and because Wizard Spider is a little bit new, I'm gonna give it a weighting of 2 versus Deep Panda of 1. So you can put in your own expression, you can change the comments and the color codes and all that stuff, right? Toy around with that at your leisure. I'll click Create Layer, and what it's going to do is it's now given me a merged view of both of them. So you can see there that had a score of 2, okay? That will mean that it's Wizard Spider only, because if it was both of them, it would be a 3. Excellent. All right, so I'm gonna change the colors here. I'm gonna combine the two and show the tag so I can see all of the technique numbers in there. The ones in red, used by both. Score of 3, because I combined them, I aggregated them, and also I changed the color scheme. So I can look at this guy and show a score of 3. Both of them use it. So now I get a pretty good picture of who I'm after. If you're in a specific country, maybe there's certain groups that you're more concerned with. You can download and aggregate all of them into one view. All right. So, well, now I got a cursor. Oh, wonderful. Very cool. All right, so I'll rename it, and you'll see why I renamed it later. If you want to download this and keep it so you don't have to do it again, all those options are there for you. So what did we just do? We just understood who our adversary was, what are the tactics, techniques, sub-techniques, and even procedures that they may use, okay? Pretty cool. Didn't take us much time, right? It was a couple minutes, including my fumbling around at the screen, okay? Now let's talk about knowing ourselves. What are some of the things that we do really well? Maybe what are some of the things we don't do very well? So we're gonna use a different tool, also open source, called Detect. And what Detect is going to allow us to do is take credit for things that we're doing. So if I know my environment and I'm saying, okay, I collect sysmon, I collect firewall logs, I do all of these things, I can use this tool to create that for me, and then I can convert it from YAML to JSON and bring it into Navigator. And then I can compare who I'm up against with what I do really, really well. So within a couple minutes, I can do kind of a self-assessment to see how I would fare against those vendors or those groups. Right, so here's where it is. Again, open source. This was written by a couple of gentlemen in Europe, sponsored by Rabobank, who I think they're here as well in ANZ. So really cool resource, and we're gonna show a demo of that. And before I do, I just wanna give a shout out to Mike McPhee. This is in there. You'll notice him, he's always wearing floral shirts, always. So really great guy, a wonderful bloke. And he's got a blog page, so Raiders of the Lost ARP, and does really good write-ups of current and related threats. I'll put a link in his or in the WebEx Teams room, or you can just do a search for this. Really good stuff, really good videos on his YouTube channel as well. Excellent. So what we're going to do here is the tool can be run locally. So if you've got a Python environment or you want to set up Docker, you can do that as well. So we're running the tool locally, and what it's going to do is it's going to give us a web server interface. Oh, this is great now that I can fast forward. Wonderful. All right, so what we're seeing here is we've got data sources, meaning our own stuff. If we want to look at what we're doing, that would be data sources. If you want to look at techniques and groups, we can import that information as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go under data sources. I'm going to choose my domain of enterprise attack. I can choose what platform I'm looking at. So if I want to focus just on, let's say, Windows, I can do that. If I just want to focus on Linux, I can do that. If I want to say I'm bringing in information just from those tools, I can do that as well. It has an inline search. So if I want to take credit for things that I'm doing, like sysmon as an example, I can do that as well. In this case, I'm not going to add them one by one. I'm going to import a YAML file, and what that's going to do is I'm going to be able to go down here to the bottom. Oh, that's great. Wonderful. So I imported a file that I already had, which is also great if you guys want to update that. Oh, we just did something? Let's give ourselves some points for that. So you don't have to recreate this stuff all the time, right? So what you're seeing here is, what are the things that I'm doing? Again, sysmon. Maybe I'm logging failed logon attempts, or I'm logging actual logon attempts, or what are all the things that I'm doing? Monitoring process creation on a Windows box, et cetera. So all of those are listed here. These are the things I'm doing, okay? Work with your desktop management team, or working with the firewall team if I'm taking firewall rules. I can also manually add them on the right-hand side. I'm just gonna skip forward real quick, okay? So here I'm taking Windows workstations. Here is the data quality part. So I'm saying, is it complete? How often? What's my retention rate? Does it come into the system like right away? Or am I polling for it daily? I can add attributes to that source of information. So it's really quite good to give us, describe all the things that we're doing. So you can see here on the left of all the things we're taking credit for. Now, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna click on Save YAML File. So you see it saved there. I'm gonna skip all this stuff. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the script that they provide to convert that YAML file into JSON. Why are we doing that? Because we're gonna import it into Navigator, and we're gonna see how what we're doing compared to what those bad guys are doing against us, and we're gonna go, okay, I'm covered here, I'm not covered here. So I can do a mapping of a brand new adversarial group, I don't know, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, depends if my mouse works or not. Glad to hear you guys are awake, that's good. All right, so I did the conversion. I'm gonna copy it into the downloads folder. Now I'm gonna pop back over to Navigator, okay? There was the tabs we had earlier, Deep Panda, Wizard Spider, and then that combined view. This fourth tab, I'm gonna upload from local. And what you're gonna see here is, look at that. That's all the things that we're doing, which is basic endpoint hygiene controls. Okay, logging and controls there. So what you're gonna see is that attack is very heavily weighted towards endpoint controls. It's branching out a little bit more, but that's the pedigree of the tool. So looking at this, I can say, wow, I've got a lot of coverage for these types of tactics and techniques with just turning on components on my endpoints, okay? I didn't have to buy anything to do this. Many of these Cisco doesn't cover, I hate to say, but you can get a lot of coverage just doing best practices on your endpoints. Now, so that's tab 4, and you can see all the details there. I'm not gonna try and read it. I know it might be small up here. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to add in now one that was provided by my Cisco team. So we also have coverage matrix that can be given to you in JSON, so that you say, oh, I've got Cisco Umbrella. What does it do? I've got secure workload. I've got Panoptica. I've got XDR. I've got whatever it happens to be. What kind of coverage does that give me in our environment, okay? So what I'm gonna do here, and it's not a complete one, this one that I'm importing, but I just wanted to show you. So there's secure.json. There's what Cisco is giving me with the products that I've purchased from them. Okay, so I can see, right, I'm doing this, I'm doing scanning, maybe I'm doing vulnerability management, maybe the firepower threat defense is doing something for me. I've got all that stuff in there, right? So just a quick mapping of what Cisco provided. So that's my 5th tab, or my 5th layer. And you can see all of that here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create the last one. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, right, I'm gonna take the combined threat picture of Deep Panda, Wizard Spider, so that when we merge together, we're gonna take all the things that we're doing with our endpoint and the Cisco stuff in there, and I'm gonna do a mapping of what they do and what we can protect against, okay? So you can see all the different layers named there, and as new layer, and I'm gonna choose, oops, some of the capabilities, like or the comments from Wizard Spider, if you have color schemes and all that stuff. And what we're seeing here is my range is now -6 to +6, meaning that if the adversary uses it and I have nothing for it, my score is gonna be high. The opposite, if I've got protections in place, I'm cutting back those points and I'm doing well, right? So what you're gonna see here, and then specifically if areas that I have coverage and the bad guys have no adversarial techniques, I'm going to do really well, okay? So what you can see here is a better view of what I have. So here's the score of 3, meaning that maybe we have no protections and both of those bad guys are using the tools in that technique after us, okay? Versus if I had a product, that would have taken some demerit points or knocked that score back. So this gives you a nice quick view of those 2 adversaries versus our capabilities, okay? Excellent. How does that look? It's a nice, easy way to validate what we're doing against a couple of those adversaries. Typically, you'd probably do more than just those 2, and you can start to combine them. Okay, so really, really quick and easy way to be able to measure yourselves to some of the adversary groups. All right. Okay, so what about Cisco tools? This is a Cisco event, so these aren't mandatory slides, but you know, we do want to talk about our stuff a little bit. I'm not going to do demos of those individual products, but what I want to do is I want to give you a bit of a guidance to what we're doing and where we plan to go in all of our products. Okay, so if you look at this is one that Talos created in July. There's 5 different products here. There's secure cloud analytics, secure endpoint, firewall, the secure internet gateway, not Cisco Secure Access, just the gateway part of Umbrella, and malware analytics, which is our sandbox, our detonation environment. So there's 5 products, and you can see our coverage across the matrix. Or at least I can, because I'm close, right? So what you're seeing here is there's different colors here, and you can see which one covers. Again, the attack matrix is very heavily weighted to endpoint controls, which is why you'll see secure endpoint covering many of these. If you're using other vendors in the EDR space, you probably have a lot of this covered as well. Okay, so you guys can go and create your own. This is just an example, and it's not all of the products. If you hadn't heard of Talos before, this is our intelligence group. This is the team that not only collects information from our products, but also pushes signatures and updates back down to our products. They also write really good blogs. They do threat spotlights. All sorts of really good stuff. So do take a look at talosintelligence.com, and up at the top you'll see all sorts of information there. So in this particular one, this was done I think just on the 30th of November. So this one's called Sugar Ghost. You can read all about it, and you can also see the infection chain. So it talks about when the first thing happened, what did the adversary do after that, what did we see, et cetera. So it's a nice, easy way to understand a very difficult topic, which is malware, right? And understanding what it does. We also will give the MITRE attack mapping, so you'll see all of the different tactics and techniques that are there, and we also give you the IOCs. So if you want to take this, put them into something like XDR or query your SIM for any of these things to see if you've seen that in your environment, it's a nice, easy way to do it. So all of these reports are right there. Cool. So into the products. The first one is secure endpoint. So if we have events that happen in secure endpoint, let's say for example, a file lands on one of our machines and an alert pops. Okay? If I click on that, I'm going to be able to see what the tactics and techniques, and I can get an exact mapping back to MITRE, what that particular file is known to do, or what that hash is known to do. Okay? So that's on the EDR tool called Secure Endpoint. Okay? Inside the firewall, we now have 2 new capabilities. The first one is you can search snort signatures for attack mapping. So you can say network scanning as an example of discovery. What are all the snort signatures that can help me detect against that particular technique? And they'll be listed right there. So it's a nice, easy way to go MITRE attack framework, privilege escalation, and then search for whatever it happens to be. Okay? For logging, That's also now available in the event viewer inside the firewall. So you see, okay, this particular event happened, what's the MITRE mapping to it? So when you're looking at that going, hey, I'm seeing a lot of discovery stuff, right? Maybe it's something I want to look at, right? As an example. So it's not only in the policy, but it's also available in the log viewer. Next up, secure malware analytics, formerly known as Threat Grid. Okay, really, really popular detonation environment that can be run as a service, meaning you upload the file to the cloud, or we can integrate it with a firewall, an email gateway, a proxy. Umbrella, or our secure access solution, also talks to this thing, right? So we send it a file, we blow it up in that environment, no system harmed, and we get the report. So we watch everything that it does, right? The call homes, the memory access, all that good stuff, okay? So what we can see here on the dashboard is an overview of what happened, or what we're seeing in the sandbox environment. So this is at a high level, right? I can click into an individual file. So I'm looking at just this one file hash, or this one executable, and I can see all of the different attack components that are in it. So defense evasion, discovery, privilege escalation, memory, all that good stuff. I can also then click on the MITRE attack component. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me that matrix view of exactly what that detonated malware is doing or had done when we were watching it. Okay, so you can look at this and go, all right, that looks similar to one I saw yesterday. Is there any correlation between the two? If I want more information, I'm clicking on that and I'm reading about that. If I want to link out to MITRE, I've got that as well. So we're empowering you to use tools like open source MITRE and the attack specifically to not only increase your knowledge, but also understand what we're seeing in the environment. So all of our products are adopting this. We also have services like on the firewall, CTID, that allow you to share some of this telemetry and metadata across all your different systems, okay? Cool. So that's the malware analytics part. Orbital, interesting that Aaron just walked in the room as like the guy who all right, so Orbital gives us the ability to query our systems to not only look for infections that may have happened or symptoms of future, right? So it gives us this ability to query into our fleet and look for that before things really get out of hand, okay? Secure network analytics, previously called StealthWatch. If there's any StealthWatch customers in here. This stuff is really good because it focuses on telemetry that we got from our network, okay? Flow data. Stuff that's seen in our environment. So this will tell us discovery. This will tell us beacons, C2, outbound connections for data exfiltration. There is rules inside StealthWatch, pardon me, network analytics, that look for just that. And that's what the rules are called. Right? It's very simple for us to do. So we can sort by things, we can look for discovery events, all of that stuff in our flow data. Okay? Here is the mapping. I'm not going to read all this to you, but I'll put all the links in our WebEx Teams room. So this is all the things that StealthWatch does. So remember that JSON that I imported into Attack earlier, the navigator? Remember when I said it wasn't meant to be complete? This would just be what Secure Network Analytics allows us to do. Okay? Cool. Cloud analytics, big component of XDR. Very similar, it gets a lot of that telemetry stuff, can tell us we've got call homes to this, or we're seeing scanning stuff to that particular service. Again, all of that information is in the NDR component of XDR. And for those of you that are just joining some of the security sessions, yes, we have a lot of acronyms as well. All right. Secure workload, not to be outdone. This is the software-based solution that we can put on physical servers, virtual servers, in your DC, in the cloud. It's an agent-based component that gives us segmentation, process visibility, memory protections, all of that good stuff. It also has its own view of what am I seeing on the workload side. And it can tell you, all right, I've got, I don't know, this particular event, or I've got this particular technique that I should be concerned about. So the mapping is there as well, and any events that come through will also be mapped to that. Panoptica, a kind of a newer area for us. I think this is like the second last slide of the Cisco stuff. But it also gives out a mapping. So if you've got CI/CD code development that you're doing, or if you're looking for cloud workload protection or CSPM or all that sort of stuff, Panoptica can API protection, et cetera. All of that's there in Panoptica. Again, right, you're seeing a trend here that this also has the MITRE mapping there as well. And then lastly, definitely not least, is our XDR offering, where we're bringing in all of those many of those components that I was just talking about, the endpoint, the network telemetry, the cloud analytics, SOAR-like capabilities to automate and orchestrate and respond and mitigate. All of that stuff is in XDR. And as events come in, high priority events, you see here, I can look at this and it will tell me all the different phases of a kill chain like map to attack, and I can click on it and get all the information I want. So the good thing is you didn't have to pivot out of the system. You can see it all right within the tools. Okay? If you want to go deeper, you can click on it and we link back to MITRE. Okay? So all of this information is shared within the systems. All right, I got 18 minutes left to cover. Just I've got one more demo and then kind of the wrap up. So I think we're doing all right. So we've talked about the adversaries, what they do. We've talked about the protections we have and what we think we do well. Now let's put that through the test. Let's see if what would happen if one of those adversaries was in our environment. I'm going to talk about how you can run something like a test on your local environment, or how you can do a more distributed version. So this is how do we make sure that this stuff actually works? There are options out there to do single kind of spot tests. Metasploit could be one, Red Canaries, Atomic would be another. So kind of focus just on one particular thing. The second option we have, and that's fine if you've got people that have that kind of capability. The second option would be looking at emulation, and I'll compare and contrast the two in a minute. So emulation is more than just that kind of spot check. It's all the different steps that were taken. What did we do well in that area? What did we protect? What did we miss potentially? Right, so all of that is there. And then lastly, you also have the option, there is commercial tools and commercial services. Cisco CX is one that will do testing for you. And there's a lot to be learned from those experts as well, okay? So we've got single tests, we've got the emulation, and then we've got services that are out there. So if I compare, I'm sure we've all heard of penetration testing. What we try to do is we try to exploit a potential vulnerability on a machine to do something, right? And it could be just one thing that we're trying to do. So the scope could be limited, or it could be like a network range, but the idea is to test prevention, not on the detection, not usually. If we look at adversarial emulation, what we're talking about is more than just one particular scope or threat. What we're talking about is how resilient are we across that entire group of techniques. So if Deep Panda or Wizard Spider or whoever was after us, how would we fare if those guys were in our environment? Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Interestingly enough, when we talk about Caldera, it's going to give us the option to do blue team and red team and some purple, and we can. Yeah, I'll show you in the demo, whereby we can interact with what's going on. We can monitor really good reports that are out there for if you have managers that like relations graphs and all that kind of eye candy. Really good for them to say, hey, look, we've got this issue. We need to do something, right? So a lot of this will arm you guys with the backup information that you need to be able to get stuff done, right? Turning on a service, possibly even acquiring a capability, like some of the examples we gave earlier. So here's the website or the component of MITRE.org called Caldera. It includes a lot of really cool plugins. Red Canary is one. It's got ways that you can simulate. Like using mock as an example. It's got the human plugin where you can interact with malware. It's got a scoreboard, all kinds of really cool stuff. And it integrates with that first demo that I showed earlier. So we can take that out and bring it back. So Just some terminology. When we talk about ability is a technique, the adversary is equipped with abilities as expected. Agents can be run on your machine using something like mock, or they can be deployed in your environment. You can actually use Caldera in a lab environment with your AD, with your Exchange server, with your services that are there, and have it running in that environment, as opposed to, let's say, learning Metasploit or learning some of those tools and having to have somebody there to kind of keep that thing up, right? So the operations are just like a playbook. Jitter, we can vary how often the agents call home, how often they're instructed to do things. We don't want to just run everything like bang, 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 because we'll probably get detected. So if we want to run something over maybe 2 or 3 days and see how we would fare, if the IPSs would miss it or that sort of thing, right? Lots of different plugins. Again, there's some examples here. Response gives us, interestingly named, the ability to respond. Gameboard gives us that scoreboard. The human plugin gives us the ability to interact with the environment kind of in real time. If you want to run and insert your own exploits or your own whatever it is into that flow, you can do that as well. So it's not just a click, let it run, and whatever. There's ways that you can interact into it. Again, unlike many tools that are on in the marketplace, especially those that are free, it gives us the ability to do both, right? The red and the blue. So the attackers and defenders. Okay, so it's a really, really cool tool. And yeah, there's a bunch of plugins. The documentation is really, really good. All right, so let's do the demo. Just remember that we're running this locally. So I'm just gonna, now that I have mouse control again. All right, so I'm gonna run all this, log in, and do a quick pause. So if you remember, the agents are the things we can have either kind of on our system using mock, or they can be deployed in our environment. We've got access to create adversaries. We can fine tune their abilities. Lots of different configuration stuff we can do around port numbers and all that stuff. You can tune that to your environment. So here's all the configuration details and different plugins that we're using. Again, it's really, really simple. I mean, you can download the package and have this up and running on your laptop in 5 minutes. And then, of course, tweaking and tuning, right? So you don't need a big infrastructure to try and do this. All right, so you see here we've got five agents deployed: Death Star, X-Wing, and the Millennium Falcon. I think some of you may know what I'm talking about there. All right, so here's the agent details. If I'm running as a privileged user or not. Again, if you're interested, do take a look at this stuff. All right, let me move forward. Okay, so what I'm choosing here is the profile of Wizard Spider, and what you're gonna see here is, unlike MITRE that gave you a text representation of all the different tactics that they employ, all the techniques that are within that, you get a nice visualization of where they spend their time, okay? Yes, you can pivot out and start looking at all the stuff, but what I'm seeing here is command and control. You know, almost a quarter of the time that they spend focused on doing that technique and all the different things. So when we run these operations, we're gonna see these exact flows. Hey, I was able to penetrate that particular machine. I installed something on top of it, right? That thing then beaconed out or called home to C2 as an example, and then we started seeing data exfiltration. We're gonna see all of those steps in this kind of graphic representation. So it's really, really powerful, and it's a little bit more of a visual stimulus to look at and understand than just the text, okay? Interestingly enough, if you run this in your environment and you are able to capture credentials or screenshots of compromise, it'll save all that stuff for you. So it hits pretty hard. Like when you say, hey, we ran this against AD and we compromised the admin account, it like scares people out of their boots, right? I don't know what your equivalent saying would be out here, but so if you wanted to add capabilities to your adversary, you can do that. Again, don't forget that the ability to interact with the operation is there as well. So if you want to launch your own stuff and maybe add in, there's a Metasploit plugin as an example, all of that is there as well. So that's the operation. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. If I fast forward, yeah, you can see all the stuff that it's doing, just in the interest of time. I'm going to fast forward through some of this stuff. And there, yeah, absolutely. I'll put it in the room. In fact, I'll do you one better. I'll just point you to Mike McPhee's blogs, and yeah, all the voices is there, and there's a slightly different accent, but really, really good stuff.
Good luck keeping Caldera running.
Yeah, the voice in the back is Aaron Woland. If you heard some of his sessions, I think he had what, 3 this year or something like that. So. Oh, okay. All right. So here we're seeing the entire flow of what we just ran, that whole playbook that we just ran, and what state. Some of this stuff can take days, a week, right? So what we're able to see here is success. Were we able to run? Did we get the exact outcome that we wanted? What's the view of it, right? If you want to look at what's been run, so you can see what the exact command was done at each step. So it's a really good learning tool to understand what's happening in our environment. So I'm just going to fast forward this stuff to the really interesting part. Eye candy is good. I think the output of the debrief, the actual report that you can download, much better, because it gives you snapshots of all this stuff. But if you like to do this and understand exactly how it happened, what the timeline looks like, what agents were there, any facts or traits that were captured, all of that stuff is there, and you can see it all. All right, now here's the really cool part. So I'm going to create a report here, and I'm going to say, just give me everything that you've got about the entire, even though it's not done, I'm just going to capture everything. So this is the operations debrief. It's going to show me all the different steps in the environment, all the tactics that were used. Everything is right there. What you're going to see here at the bottom, this is the money right here. So if you run something like this operation, and you can show the defenders, like, okay, there's your admin password for the entire forest. That hits, right? I once did an assessment for a customer, and we showed them BlackBerry messages. This is dating itself, but we showed the CISO messages that the CEO had from his BlackBerry on the BES. Needless to say, we were called back in to do a little bit more of an audit, but this type of the facts and traits of what we saw hits home pretty hard, especially if you're able to fully compromise a system. And we didn't have to be experts at this. I really didn't have to understand all the things that were happening, okay? So really good tool for us to understand our environment. So that's the verification of our setup. Now, a couple things, I talked about this earlier, the adversarial profiles. Again, you can look at MITRE, but this gives you a nice representation of what that particular operation looked like, right? How much time was spent where. When you compare different adversarial groups, you'll see some spend a lot more time in the discovery phase, okay, than others. And I showed you the example of the debrief. You can customize all of this, and yeah, the report is just really valuable. All right, so to focus on the fixes, how can we do things better? We talked a lot today about the techniques. Focus on what techniques may be employable in your environment, and look to see what you can do. A lot of it, again, depends on how your endpoint hygiene looks like. Okay, you don't necessarily, although we'd be happy if you guys bought more Cisco stuff, a lot of the time you can pick up and take credit for a lot of these protection capabilities just with endpoint, okay, with Windows and Linux controls, okay? So there's the techniques that we can look at. Again, there's mitigation. If you do look at the MITRE website and look at mitigations, it will tell you some of the things that you can do to be able to protect against that particular adversarial group or that particular procedure. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is really good stuff, and it's not super dry. Right? You can look at it and go, all right, I think I got that. You don't have to be an expert in this area to get something valuable from MITRE. All right. For those of you that are looking for a little bit more, there is the CAR, so the Cyber Analytics Repository. This gives you a nice way to be able to take in pseudocode, understand what's happening, and take information and put it into SIEM rules. So if you're using Splunk, or you're using QRadar, or using Elastic, or whatever you happen to be using, this gives you a nice way to be able to take that code and go out and look in your SIM if you're seeing those things. So that's one. Do take a look at Defend. That also allows us to understand what protections and capabilities we can use to thwart techniques. For those of you that are more focused on web protections, and OWASP Top 10 is your primary area, there's a slightly different tool also from MITRE called CAPEC. And what this will do is it'll give you more web-based exploit stuff to look at and the associated protections. Okay, because like I said, attack tends to focus not only on endpoint, but it's heavy in the endpoint space as opposed to web stuff. Also, I should have mentioned earlier for the Australians in the room, which I think is most, the Essential 8, maturity level 1 and 2, yeah, all day, especially about endpoints. So do take a look at that. I'll put some documentation in the room on that. So if that's something you're concerned about, the Essential 8. And the same thing goes for the CISA, the CISA Zero Trust capabilities. Same thing you could say for CERT or NIST Zero Trust, and it's applicable to all. For those that do malware, either reverse engineering, or if you've got colleagues that are in this space, the MIC definition allows us to kind of speak the same language when we're talking about malware. So this is a really good one. Again, you guys can take a look at this at your leisure. So here's the conclusion, baby steps. Try to take what we've talked about today in your environment, just give it a try. If you could, if you do try it, report back in the room or just ping me directly and say, hey, that was pretty cool. I tried it. I learned something about my environment or what we're doing. And I think we can get some value out of it. So it's not just a one-time kind of set it and forget it. This is something you need to nurture, right? It becomes a practice, right? Like all things we do to improve ourselves, start with the first step. Get to the gym on the first day, as an example, right? Don't just say, I'm gonna buy a membership and go every single day. Excuse me. So take those baby steps, get better. Let us know if you are, and some of the tools that we talked about. What have we learned? We talked about Navigator. We talked about Detect, merging what the bad guys do, what we do. We showed a little bit about Caldera and how that differs from kind of spot attack tools, how emulation will could help us in our environment. Talked a lot about the open source information. We talked about Cisco capabilities as well. Some don't do things, don't assume all the techniques are equal. Some definitely have more impact than others. Don't alert on every technique. I have customers that just say, hey, let's log everything. Okay, right. And then you need to hire like an expert at filtering, right? So take a look at what things are really, really important in your environment. If you are a target of a particular adversary group and they like to use a particular service or as a procedure, maybe you want to go and tweak your logs to say, hey, if I see a LSA dump or if I see PowerShell that shouldn't be in my environment, that goes right to the top, okay? Automate where possible. Use WebEx Teams or Cisco Teams, or Microsoft Teams to be able to use bots and stuff like that to give you more information. Don't misunderstand your coverage. Just because you have let's say an endpoint detection software, if you don't have the license, don't give yourself credit, right? Truly understand what you're doing and what you have and where you need to go and kind of be truthful about it, right? Don't stay in the matrix, meaning that it's evolving, right? The adversaries don't necessarily just say, right, we're only gonna do those things that's well documented, right? We're gonna potentially look for others. always keep on the eye of that. And don't forget the fundamentals. So the best practices, hygiene, all that stuff. I've got a bunch of links in here with 2 seconds to go. Do take a look at this stuff. Again, it's all in the room. And yeah, with that, I'll be hanging around. I know Aaron's up next. You guys can catch me in the room. I would appreciate if you took a moment and did the survey. We volunteer to be here, and if we don't score well, we're not invited back. And I really like Australia and Melbourne specifically. I would love to be back. If you guys learned something from the session, ping me directly right in the room. If there's something you didn't like, don't put it in there, tell me. Tell me directly. If there's something you want to see next time, or a lab or something like that, give us feedback. We're here for you. I know many of you paid a lot of money and you're taking time away from work. We appreciate you all being here, and we appreciate the opportunity you give us to speak. Thank you all very much.